You are listening to the Zeebzob Pinewood Derby Roundup, Episode 5, sponsored by Goat Boy Products, makers of high-quality Pinewood Derby tools. And now, here's your host, Zeebzob. Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Zeebzob podcast. I am Zeebzob. I want to welcome you to episode 5. I hope you all are enjoying listening to these podcasts as much as I am making them. It's pretty fun. Okay, again, the board that I use, the forum, is zeebzob.proboards.com. The blog is zeebzob.wordpress.com. And again, my Twitter handle is @zeebzob. Since last time, we have 0 new Twitter followers. All right. So, one thing that was brought to my attention is, how do you listen to these podcasts, or more to the point, how do you subscribe to them? If you are an iOS user, meaning an Apple product, whether it be an iPad, iPod, or an iPhone, they have an app called Podcasts, and you can actually go to the Apple Store and search for Zeebzob, and within iTunes you can subscribe right there. So whenever I put out a new podcast, it'll automatically alert you. And I'm sure you can set some kind of settings to whether it's, every day or a few hours or whatever, to go ahead and automatically look and download the new episode. For Android users, I have an Android. The app I use is called Podcast Addict. It's a free app, and same thing. Once you subscribe to the feed with that podcast, you can automatically have the new episodes download. And then once they're downloaded, you can just listen to them whenever you want. Listen to it for a while, and if it's a long one, pause it, pick it up later on, whether you be driving or working in the shop or whatever, commuting to work. So podcasts are really something that I've been enjoying lately, and I know down for Derby, Scott Black is really a big podcast listener. He's turned me on to a couple of them, like Adam Carolla and Joe Rogan. Those are a couple that I've recently started listening to. Another one, and a lot of you may have already heard of this one, is Serial. That was a pretty interesting one. It was a 12-part story. They were kind of going over a murder that happened to a high school kid a long time ago, like 1999. It was quite interesting, and but at any rate, so podcasts are something that's, like I said, fairly new to me as far as my discovering, listening to them, and of course making this one. But I have been enjoying them quite a bit. All right, another thing I want to mention, a couple weeks ago when we had Quad Dad on, he mentioned that he got his start in the PWDR league, and we were wondering, what's been going on with them. Lightning Boy actually sent me a message and told me that they're still in operation, but they don't do proxy racing anymore. They do live-only racing, which, I can understand that, because proxy racing is kind of a pain as far as the people that run it, getting those cars, and unboxing them, then reboxing them and shipping them out after the race is over. It's a tireless, thankless job. So if you do race proxy, you guys like Terry Cooper and John and Joel from NPWDRL and the Jukes brothers, it's a lot of work they have to do to go into letting us race proxy. So I can understand Warren from PWDR not wanting to have to deal with that anymore. So, but that's, like I said, a live only racing. So if you're in the Minneapolis area and you want to do some live racing, you can check them out. So thanks to Lightning Boy for the information, and I'm glad to pass that on. Also, there's another board out there that you guys can go to for some Pinewood Derby information. It's globalderbysociety.proboards.com. That site is run by Mood Swing Productions. A lot of you know who Mood is. He's been around for a long time. He was proxy racing way back in the WIRL days, so basically the very beginning of proxy racing. But he's got a board out there, and it focuses on not only the racing for speed, but a lot of the guys that build cars for craftsmanship. So he's got a whole section dedicated to that. There's some racers out there who really enjoy that part of the Pinewood Derby hobby, not just always trying to go fast, but building a car that's pretty cool looking. So go check that out. Again, globalderbysociety.proboards.com. All right, so over here at the Zeebzob Speed Shop this past weekend, we did have a little test and tune. In attendance were myself, Zeebzob, E3 PWD, who you know from the podcast, as well as Mario, Quad Dad. Also here were Rocket Car and Mr. B. I was hoping to get Rocket Car here in the studio for a little sit down, but he had to leave early before we had a chance to do this, so we'll get him in here soon enough. But the results of the tests were pretty interesting. Brian, Rocket Car's real name is Brian, he brought a new car called Lava, which I know he's posted pictures of on MPW DRL site. And the craftsmanship that went into that car was pretty amazing. He said he's got about 20 hours of work just in the body on that thing, and I believe it, with all the fenders and flares that he's got around the wheels. Now it's this is just a product of Lightning Boy having a lot of success. The car does look a lot like the one that Lightning Boy just set the track record with in street stock at NPW DRL. But it was pretty cool to see that, and right out of the gate, it was a pretty fast car. At the end, they did have a little race-off between E3, PWD, Mr. B, and that Lava car from Brian, but I won't give you the results. Leave it a little surprise for this week's race over at NPW DRL, but I'll just say that it was a pretty fast car, that's for sure. So thanks to Brian for bringing it out here. Let me take a look at that. It's pretty cool. So it was a good time. We were here for a couple hours and ran some bearing cars, and Mr. B had a whole bunch of cars. He had a Street Pro and an Eliminator, but I only had one car, Primal Scream, that I put together for the test and tune, and it was running pretty good. I had to cut some new wheels for the rear because I had a broken wheel the last outing. So I'm just going to be shipping that one for this time because, again, I had intentions to build more cars, but of course, again, they didn't get done. So with that car, I will be sending some spare wheels for the trip, just in case you get a broken wheel, because it just happens with these thin acrylic wheels. They're very brittle, and so that's something to be very aware of if you do race proxy with the bearing cars. So but that's what I'm sending. I'll be sending it tomorrow. Today is Monday, and it was Martin Luther King Day. We didn't have any mail, so I'll be sure to get that out tomorrow, just to make sure that it gets there in plenty of time. Now, this time of year, it shouldn't be an issue. Now, I know last month with the Christmas rush for all the packages, everything was delayed, and of course there were cars that didn't make it on time. But this month shouldn't be a problem, but again, I'm going to send it a day earlier than I normally do. I normally send on Wednesday, and it would typically arrive in Utah on Friday. But again, I just want to be a little more cautious and make sure it gets there. I'm sure it'll be there on Thursday, but you just don't want to take any chances. All right. Last time we talked a little bit about some tools, and as I listened back on the podcast, there's something that really bothered me about when I was talking about my sander, my belt sander. It's got along with the belt sander, it's got a disc sander, and I kept calling it a drum sander last last month or last week, and I just cringe every time I listen to that. It's one of those things where you know what I meant, but I said something else. So anyways, instead of a drum sander, it should have been a disc sander that's attached to that. Also, I didn't mention the axle bender that I use that Goat Boy makes. And if none of you have ever seen it, it's a really cool tool that basically clamps down your axle. What you do is you cut a little groove into the axle where you want it to bend for your front dominant axle, and then with this tool you just insert it in there, clamp it down, and you lift a little lever and it gives it a quick bend, and you can adjust that. Once you find the amount of bend that you like, the tool is set, and you can bend them over and over and over every time you get an axle you need to bend. And it's a really slick tool, very high quality. So again, that's one of Goat Boy's tools that he makes, and it's it's funny because when some of my friends who aren't in the Pinewood world, if they come down to my basement and they see all the sanders and saws and drill presses, and they say, what's all this for? I said, well, it's strictly for Pinewood Derby. And they kind of look at me like, you only use this stuff for Pinewood Derby. Yeah, basically. And then I'll start showing them some of the tools, like the block and all this stuff. And then when I get to that axle bender, they look at that and they're like, this is a specific tool for Pinewood Derby only. I'm like, yeah. So they're pretty amazed that things like this exist. It just kind of blows their mind, and I always find it kind of funny. So another tool that I didn't mention, again, I talked about the Derby Works line, but one tool they do have that is super useful is the I think they call it the Pro Axle Press. It's basically they say used to straighten axles. It's just a little square block that's cut in two halves. It's got a groove in the middle. But that tool actually is really good as an axle vise. You can clamp. You can hold on to the axle if you put the axle in that little press and then put it in a vise or what have you. That will hold the axle without marring it up. So it's not really its intended purpose, but everybody that I know has one. They all use it for the same thing. So if you need to hold an axle without damaging it and have some of that axle sticking out, that's a good tool. I mean, other tools from Derby Works that I do have that I don't recommend, like that wheel lathe. It works. It does what it's supposed to. The purpose of it is to basically cut the outer edge of the wheel so you get a nice concentric wheel. But I'll tell you, I used it one time, and by the time I was done, my fingers hurt so bad that I didn't mind going out and spending $400 on a lathe. So that is what it is. But again, I'm sure a lot of the racers out here have that tool, and again, I bet a lot of them have it just sitting there in the drawer like I do. All right. The upcoming race at the Zeebzob Speed Shop. Something proposed just today by Goat Boy. And I say, yeah, let's do it. He says, with the schedules being out, NPWDRL and APR having a race at the end of February, if we go 2 weeks in front of that, February 15th, it's a Sunday. Now, obviously, with the 14th being Valentine's Day, those with wives know that will not, probably will not be a good idea to have a race that particular day. So what we'll do is the Sunday, the 15th, have a race here at the Zeebzob Speed Shop, specifically for bearing cars. You can come live, you can race proxy. We'll probably post more details on zeebzob.proboards.com. But again, it'll be 2 weeks between, before any other race, so your cars will get back in plenty of time. Now, I know in past, Ian has machined up a little trophy or a plaque for the winner. Maybe we'll get some for a top qualifier too. So he'll be working on that aspect of it. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. Live racing, like I've said in the past, there's nothing like it. So definitely want to have something here for the local guys, a little race, a little something to go along with our test and tune session. Anybody out there that wants to come to the Zeebzob Speed Shop, more than welcome. But if it's just for the one class, so I would not really expect anybody to come out here if they've got like a 4 or 5 hour drive ahead of them. If you want to, great. If it were me, I think I'd pass and just send it through the mail. So that being said, look for more information on that. I will get together with Ian and hammer out some details, but I think we should have that and have a go at it and have some fun. So that'll be coming up in just about a month, a little bit less. All right. Some other things to talk about in this podcast. The Nationals are always something I think we should mention and have discussions about. Now, I know that they're going to be here before you know it. It's in the end of April, and I was talking to E3, and he said that he already booked his hotel room. So one thing he passed along is that he mentioned that he was coming into town for the Mid-America Nationals, and he mentioned Class, which is the facility that they're holding it at, and he got a discount on the room. So that's definitely something to be aware of. So if you are going to be planning to go out there and you're looking for lodging, definitely mention it. It won't hurt, and maybe you'll find a place with a discount. So, even if it's, $10, $20, $30, whatever, hey, it's saving money is saving money. Everybody likes to do that. So, but I have actually started on my build for the Nationals, my Unlimited. I've got a couple of things I want to try. I think they'll work, but like I said, I just started the build. The car is nowhere near any kind of testing phase or anything. So, but I'll keep you guys updated, if it's something's gonna work out or not. I won't mention too many details. I do, a couple of reasons for that. A, if it works, I want to kind of keep that a secret, and B, if it doesn't work, well, I want to save myself the embarrassment. So, I want to definitely build a couple of new, at least bearing cars, and while I'm out there, I'll bring some other cars for different classes, just so that I have something to do during the whole day. Because I've gone to races with Ian, and he'll only bring a bearing car, and he loves it. It's great, but I'm thinking, man, if I'm going all this way, I want to run a couple other classes. But Ian, he just loves the bearings. So that's his thing, and that's what he's sticking with. He's had talk in the past of building a fat wheel car, but he's a busy guy. He never has any time. One of these days, I'm going to really prod and poke him to do that and try something. Now, I know that actually, come to think of it, he has done a couple in the past, many, many years ago. PWDR had a class a few years ago. It was pretty fun. It was called the Spec Tuner, where everybody that entered that class, they got a kit from the league, and it was a laser cut body. You couldn't really modify it other than like shaping the nose and painting it. They gave you the weight, they gave you the wheels, you had to use all that stuff, and it could only be graphite. The purpose of that particular class was basically, we've all got the exact same car. It was all about the tuning. So that was kind of fun, and he was part of that. And if I remember right, he did pretty good. So one of these days, like I said, we'll get him back to the fat wheel cars and see what he does. But for now, I know he's just content doing the bearings. All right. One other thing that I want to talk about, well, I don't know why I want to talk about, maybe for therapy, but being from Wisconsin here, yesterday, we had quite the tragic loss in the NFC Championship game. And I know that most people listening to this aren't Packer fans, which that just baffles me in itself. And you would think that everybody be a Packer fan. They're such a wonderful team. At any rate, they had that game in hand, and it just was not to be. We now have our own version of Bill Buckner, As you saw, the onside kick was, well, that was just totally screwed over. But at any rate, so now we've got the Super Bowl coming up with, I think, the two most unlikable teams. If I had my wish, it would end in a 0-0 tie with no winner. But what can you do? There's always next year. So just wanted to talk about that a little bit because that's an open wound, and I tell you, the the unbelievable nature of that game, with me just happy as can be in the third quarter, and then with about, I don't know, 4 minutes to go, as the Seahawks are driving, they get that touchdown, and I start the calls of unbelievable, I can't believe this is happening, to me screaming at the TV, tackle that guy, and they're just not listening to me, and finally throwing my hands in the air, just exclaiming that we're going to lose this game, and of course eventually we do, and that's it for my beloved Packers. But that's how it goes. That's why we watch these games. That's when you have such a passion for something, it's going to break your heart, and boy, I'll tell you, that did yesterday. So I guess if you're a Seahawks fan, yay for you, but for us over here in Wisconsin, it sucked. All right, coming up in the getting back to the Zeebzob podcast, now that I got that off my chest, I am planning to do a phone interview with Down for Derby next week. So I've been playing around with the settings on my computer with Google Voice, and I think I've got it pretty good to where the caller comes through, we can record it, and they don't get any echo or feedback. I did some tests earlier with Todd Meyer, and that was just a big failure. But after tweaking the settings, I found that the calls go through well, no echo, and that should be pretty good. So Scott's a really interesting guy. I've known him for a couple of years now. We were on when we did the team racing, he was on my team, and it was a really good time. Found him to be a great guy, and he's been having some great success in the street rods. So that should be a really good interview, because I'm sure he's got a lot of things to talk about. With everything he does, he's a very innovative guy too. He, those new little weights that everybody's using inside the rear wheel cavity, he was extremely instrumental in getting those out there for everybody to run and have some success with. So I'm looking forward to that. So we're gonna hopefully do that in about a week or so. And also with that one, that should happen, after the NPW DRL race. So we'll recap that race and, talk a little bit about that, give everybody their props who's done well. Hopefully you'll be hearing Zeebzob in the bearings, but don't hold your breath. Like I said, I just kind of threw that car together. I didn't really do anything with it since I got it back from the last race. It's been kind of sitting here. And then when everybody came over for the test and tune, I decided to, make the wheels and clean the bearings and put it back together. But I only gave it a few runs. It ran fairly good comparatively to the other cars that were here. Now, one car I did want to go up against was Hurst, but Mario actually left that car in Utah. He told John just to hang on to it, because his was one of the boxes that was late and didn't make it to the race. So instead of just having it sent back and then having to send it again, he just said, keep it out there in Utah until the next race. So I did not get to get a benchmark against Hurst to see how I would do, but I think the car is running okay. All right, I guess that's about it for me in this episode. So good luck to all the racers that are going to be racing this weekend, and we will talk to you next week. This is Zeebzob signing off.